What do you want to be when you grow up? When I was 6 years old, I had two ambitions. All right, the first was to be Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Okay, and the second was to be Whitney Houston. Okay, those were my two dream jobs. I wanted to be Belle because she had brown hair, obviously, access to an amazing library. All of her friends were talking furniture. That was pretty cool. And her beast was the guy who finally defeated the awful, awful, awful Gaston. Okay, I hated that guy. I wanted to be Belle, and I also wanted to be Whitney Houston. And if you don't know who Whitney Houston is, just imagine if we could put Adele and Beyonce together. Okay, into one powerhouse woman. That is who Whitney was. And so when I was 6 years old, if you were looking for me, I was probably on the swing set in my backyard belting out my favorite Disney tunes and Whitney jams. Okay, if The Voice had been a thing back then, I would have been gunning for all four chairs to turn around. That was what I wanted to be. When I was 8 years old, I grew up a little bit, and I decided it would be really awesome to be Indiana Jones when I grew up. That's right. I didn't really want to do the whole boring archaeology professor stuff, but I did want the summer off to go have amazing adventures, you know. I could have done without the near-death experiences, especially that part in the snake pit. No, okay? I didn't want that. But I love that he got to travel the world and meet interesting people and learn about all these cultures. And I mean, the man held the Holy Grail, okay? That's a really big deal. And then by the time I was 10, I'd set my sights a little bit lower. All I really wanted was to be somebody's girlfriend, okay? And I didn't want to be somebody's girlfriend because I was super, boy crazy. I mean, I was, but that wasn't why. I wanted to be somebody's girlfriend because right around the time I was in 5th grade, see, here's the thing. At the place where I grew up, every summer, every June, we had a huge parish picnic. I don't know if any of y'all have anything like that. Ours was the carnival, and it was a really big deal. There were rides and games and food, and you just got to run around with your friends and go crazy, and your parents handed you cash, and it was awesome, okay? And right around the time when I was in 5th grade, that's when we started hearing talk from some of the big kids, 8th graders, that apparently boys and girls would go to the carnival together. I don't know what that means. I still don't know what that means, but they would do it. And I didn't want to be left out of it. And so when I was in 5th grade, y'all, this is so embarrassing, okay? I wrote myself a note from a secret admirer. Yeah. I did, and I used my non-dominant hand to disguise my handwriting, and I slipped it into my desk, and then on the day when I discovered it, I showed my friends, and I was like, oh, look, somebody likes me, and they got lit, okay, and they were like, we gotta find out who it is, let's go, who do you think it is? And I was like, oh, no. I was terrified that I was gonna be found out, right, that they would know that I was a fraud, that I would make the whole thing up, that they would make fun of me for the rest of my life. So then I moved on, and when I was a kid, when I was growing up, one of the things we did in my family was we went to the library on a weekly basis. I always liked reading. And by the time I was about 12, I remember standing in the library looking at the stacks of books, the just shelves and shelves of books, and thinking, what a cool job. To get to be the person who gets to write books. Because what I loved so much about books is that when I opened up a book, I wasn't Rachel in her backyard, right, or bedroom or living room. I was Belle in France. I was Whitney on stage in New York City, okay? I was Indiana Jones in Egypt. I loved that books could take us on such great adventures. And I thought it would be really cool to grow up to be the person who got to take people on those adventures. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I think if we could survey the crowd tonight, we'd probably hear a lot of common themes, right? Most kids go through a phase where they want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a vet. I feel like everybody wanted to be a vet at some point, right? Yeah, or maybe a rock star, right? Or maybe famous, I don't know. But when we ask little kids what they want to be when they grow up, they can give us so many awesome different answers. And I think if we asked teenagers, we'd hear a lot of the same things that I wanted when I was a teenager, okay? When I was 15 years old, the thing that I wanted the most in the world was my driver's license, okay? I just wanted to be able to get in the car and go. I didn't really care where I was going, right? Drive myself to school, go to a friend's house, go to the mall, go to work, whatever. I just wanted that independence. I just wanted to be able to go. And when I was 16, I really, really wanted a boyfriend, okay? Much like 10-year-old Rachel, except this time there was a guy I really did like, a guy who had been a great friend of mine for a year, a guy I thought might like me, but he wasn't doing anything about it, so I didn't know what to do. And then there was this other girl, and she liked him too, and that got drama, right? But then he asked me out, and we started dating, so that was cool. And then when I was 18, the only thing in the world that I wanted was to know where on earth I was supposed to go to college, okay? I didn't make the decision until May 1, deadline day. And I had options to go to a couple different schools, but I just couldn't decide because I knew I wanted some place that was kind of close to home, but not in the backyard, right? I knew I wanted a place where I could grow in my Catholic faith, whether that was a Catholic school or just a place with a great Newman Center. And most importantly, I knew I wanted to go to a place that wasn't going to put me $60,000 into debt on day one because I was still wanting that independence, right? And I wanted to study abroad too. I wanted to be able to go have those adventures. So in a way, 18-year-old Rachel wasn't that different from every other Rachel that had come before. What do you want to be when you grow up, right? We all have these desires, these things that we are longing for in our lives. And I think about the basic needs that we all have, right? We all need food, right? Water, shelter. Those things are pretty standard needs, right? If we're too hot, we can turn down the air conditioning. If we're too cold, we can throw on a hoodie. Hungry, open the pantry, right? Everything that we need is available to us. We really want for nothing. We are the 1% when it comes to the people in this world. But those basic desires, once they're all met, kind of becomes about something else, right? Okay, I've got what I need. Now I need something to do with my time, right? So maybe for you it's the sports team. Maybe you are a great athlete. If you are, I have no idea what that's like. Please explain it to me sometime, okay? And making the team can be a really awesome goal, right? You got to make the team, yeah, and it would be really helpful if you could make varsity, right? That would be good, especially not to just warm the bench, but to start. You got to make some plays. Oh, if you could set a school record or a state record, yeah, bring home a state championship, that would be awesome. Right? Or maybe sports aren't your thing. All right, that's fine. There's other options, right? There's theater. Maybe you like to participate in that. Maybe you're on the lighting crew or the sound crew or the costumes, but no, wait, it probably would be better to be on stage, wouldn't it? Yeah, because that's where people applaud for you. That's where you get the standing ovation. So yeah, being on the stage, learn how to act, and not just in the ensemble, right, but one of the lead roles. That would be great. And of course, there's school. You have to pay attention to school, right? So maybe it's about those grades. Got to make those grades, right? Start building up that college resume with a great GPA. And maybe studying's not your favorite activity, right? I mean, there are 4 new seasons of something on Netflix every day. So that's okay because there's Spark Notes, right? Yeah, it's fine. Everybody else is doing it. It's really important that I make the grade. It's got to go on that college resume. And so do the clubs. Oh, I should be in a couple clubs. I should be in this club and that club. And if we don't have a club, I should start a club because colleges, they love leadership, right? And so that's what I'll do. I'll be president of one and vice president of another. I'll found another one. Yeah, that'll be really great. Don't forget your friends. Of course, you got to have friends, right? Yeah, if your phone is not blowing up every 3 seconds, what are you, some big loser? Come on, yeah. And it doesn't really matter if those friends are going down the right path or not, right? Just as long as I'm not sitting at a lunch table alone. Just as long as somebody's texting me on Friday night, hey, come out, we want to hang out with you. Yeah, that would be good. I got to have those friends. And still not enough because, of course, there's Snapchat and Instagram and YouTube, right? I need likes and retweets and snap streaks that break records, right? Yeah, that's really, really important too. All these ways that we want to spend our time, and none of it is enough. When is it ever going to be enough, right? Because, of course, you need Nike and Sperry's and Lululemon and Chubbies and all these things, right? Gotta go get all of these things. So here we find ourselves with a phone full of contacts and no one to hang out with a closet full of clothes and nothing to wear, with literal years worth of programming available at the click of a button and nothing to watch, right? None of it seems to be enough. We have everything we could ever want to be seen, to be known, to be loved, and still something seems to be missing. And if we find in ourselves some kind of desire that this world cannot satisfy, then the only answer seems to be that we weren't made for this world. That was from my good friend C.S. Lewis, who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. And I love in his writings to a friend in a letter, he made a comment once that seems kind of funny. He asked his friend in a letter, "Do you think fish ever complain about water?" Like, no, fish probably never complain about water, right? Because they were made to live in the water. But have you ever found yourself complaining about time? How is it already June, right? Oh my gosh, the summer is halfway over. I can't wait for this in 2 months, you know? Oh, will she ever stop talking, right? We complain about time all the time because we weren't made for time. If we find in ourselves a desire for something that this world cannot satisfy, then I think the answer is that we weren't made for this world. I forgot to tell you one of the things I wanted to be when I grew up. When I was 14 years old, graduating from 8th grade, I had the opportunity to take a weekend and go away to a retreat. Kind of like what we're doing here this weekend, but on a much, much smaller scale, okay? It was just at a parish down the road from mine, and honestly, I didn't really want to go. I had no interest in that. See, where I come from, you get confirmed in 8th grade, and I'd been on a one-day confirmation retreat in preparation for my confirmation, and that was stupid and boring enough for one day. Thank you very much. So I didn't really want to give a whole weekend to Jesus camp. Are you kidding me? But the thing was, I had these two friends who really, really, really pushed me to go. And I figured in the end it was better to just go with them than to sit at home all weekend bored because they weren't around, right? So we go to the retreat, and it was interesting. It was mostly run by high school students, and the retreat was for other incoming freshmen like myself. And it was just to introduce us to this idea of youth group, this place that we could come and hang out and be, and oh yeah, we'll probably do some God stuff too. And the weekend goes on, and people gave talks. There was some fun stuff too. There was some music, and everything honestly was just okay. And everything changed for me on the Saturday night of that retreat. We went into the church, sat off to the side, and the youth minister talked for a very long time. You know how sometimes they can do that. And I don't remember everything that he said, but one sentence stood up to me because I'd never heard it before. He said that when Jesus was on the cross on Good Friday, your face flashed across his mind. I've been Catholic my whole life, and I had never heard that before. When Jesus was on the cross, your face flashed across his mind. So then he goes on to say, we're going to have an activity. Don't worry, just hang in the church till we bring you down. So I sat, and I sat, and I sat. I was in the very last group to go with about 3 or 4 other kids. They walked us down the stairs, and we walked through an activity. We walked through the crucifixion as if we were Jesus, which sounds very strange, I know. So let me explain a little further. See, we were blindfolded for this activity. They put a basket on my head. That was like my crown of thorns. I carried a wooden 2x4 on my shoulders. That was my cross, right? They sounded a hammer in the background while they tapped nails against my palms and against my feet. And the whole time that I was going through this activity, I was just telling the story in my head. Because I knew that story. I'd been hearing that story my whole life, right? If you had asked me in that moment who I thought Jesus was, if I'd had the words to explain it, I probably would have described him like a character in a story. One of those books that I love to read, right? And it's a really good story, right? There's a teenage virgin and she gets pregnant, but it's okay because it's God as a baby. And then he's born, he grows up, he's a carpenter, he works some miracles, he gets some followers. That's pretty cool. But then there's a couple people who don't like him. Oh no, so they plot to kill him. That's not good. And he dies, and that's sad, but don't worry because 3 days later he comes back because he's God. Remember? Okay, great story. And a story I knew really well because I'd been hearing it my whole life, but to me, just a story. No different than Abraham Lincoln or George Washington that I studied in my history class. So the activity ends, and they bring me back up to the church. I'm sitting in a pew by myself. I'm still blindfolded, and I'm thinking about the activity I just walked through. And I'm thinking about the fact that when Jesus was on the cross, my face flashed across his mind. And then the music guy played this song that I had never heard before. It's a really old one. It's called How Could You Say No? And if you don't know that song, it's the first couple lines that really got me. It starts off by saying, thorns on his head, a spear in his side. Still it was a heartache that made him cry. He gave his life so you could understand. Is there any way you could say no to this man? I still don't have the words to explain to you what happened to me in that moment. But I just knew. I knew in a way I had never known anything before. In a way I've known very few things since, that Jesus is real. He's real. He's not just a character in a story, but a real person who really lived and really died in a horrible way. So much worse than the activity I had just walked through. And that while he was going through that, he was thinking of me. My face flashed across his mind. And so did yours. He was thinking of you. He's been thinking about you every moment since then. He cannot get you out of his mind. And in that moment, I made a really important decision. I decided that if Jesus was for real, then my life had to look different. If he had died for me, then I would have to live for him. And so I started trying to become the person that he was calling me to be. I gave youth group a shot. I paid attention at Mass. I tried praying on my own, and everything about my life got better. That void that I'd been constantly trying to fill, right, with friends, with clubs, with noise, with clothes, with all the different things, I started to recognize that that was the void that Jesus was trying to fill. He'd been knocking at the door of my heart. I just couldn't hear him because I hadn't taken any time to listen. And not that following Jesus, in that instant changed everything. Not that my life was perfect, not that it's perfect now, okay? I am a deeply flawed, messed up, hot mess of a woman, okay? I always have been. I wasn't perfect in high school. I wasn't perfect in college. I'm not perfect now. But I'm growing in my relationship with the Lord. And as I spend that time getting to know Christ better, he is creating me into the person that he wants me to be. He is helping me to get where he wants me to go, right? Following Jesus is not a guarantee that everything will be fixed now. But it is a guarantee that one day it will be. And Jesus isn't waiting for you to have it all together before he wants to be in a relationship with you. He wants to meet you where you are right now. So that's why we're talking about this verse this weekend. This verse from Romans, right? But God proves his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Those aren't just words. It's not just a story, it's real. This passion, this love, this desire that Christ has to be in a relationship with you. God's love is not fleeting, it's permanent. It's not exclusive, it's open to all. It's not self-seeking, it's sacrificial. It doesn't bring fear or anxiety. It brings joy and peace, and it's here for all of us. Because Jesus is desperately in love with you. And knowing that, it changes everything. Mother Teresa knew that. Blessed Teresa of Calcutta, who's going to be canonized a saint this fall. Her sisters, the missionaries of charity, they serve the poor in powerful, amazing ways. They are women of deep prayer. And if you go into any chapel of the missionaries of charity anywhere around the world, beside the crucifix, you will always see two words: I thirst. Those words of Christ on the cross. It didn't mean that he was looking for a sponge soaked with wine on a hot day. It means that he is thirsting for all souls to know and to love him. And so Mother Teresa heard that call. And that's the work of her sisters, to bring souls to the Lord, to satisfy his thirst for them. She wrote in a letter to one of her other sisters, "It is very important for us to know that Jesus is thirsting for our love, for the love of the whole world. Ask yourself, have I heard Jesus directly say this word to me personally? Did I ever hear that word personally? I thirst. I want your love. If not, examine yourself. Why could I not hear?" If you haven't heard that word from the Lord, that doesn't mean he's not saying it. He wants your love. He wants you. Can you hear it? Can you hear him say those words to you and you alone? Your face flashes across his mind. He cannot get you out of his head. If you're having trouble listening, listen to the scriptures. Where over and over again, Christ reveals how desperately he wants our love, right? Consider this scene from the Gospel of John, the woman at the well. Remember that story? Right? Jesus is sitting at a well, and then a Samaritan woman comes up about noon. And so Jesus asks her to give him a drink of water. He desires something, and he asks it of her. And she protests at first, saying that a Samaritan woman cannot give water to a Jewish man. But Jesus answers and says to her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who's saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." Jesus shows his desires in this moment, and not for water, but for the woman to know and love him. Jesus wants her salvation more than anything. He wants her to have faith. He wants her to follow him. But the woman isn't quite there yet, right? She doesn't know what he means when he says living water, and replies to him and says, "Sir, you do not even have a bucket, and the cistern is deep. Where then can you get this living water?" And Jesus answers and says to her, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I shall give will never thirst. For the water that I shall give will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." Okay. It's not just about today. It's not just about quenching that thirst tonight, this weekend at this conference. It's about the rest of your life. What do you want to be when you grow up? See, we were all raised to want the American dream, right? You should go to a good school where you get good grades, so you can go to a good college, so you can get a good job, so you can live in a good neighborhood, so your kids can go to a good school where they can get good grades, and go and on and on and on. Where does it end? When will it ever be enough? It's an endless cycle. I mean, is that enough for you? Is that all you want out of your life? It's not enough for him. He wants so much more for you. See, well water, It's stagnant. It's still. It's dusty. There's probably bugs in it, right? Living water is pure and clean and flowing. It's fresh and on the move. It's vibrant. It's full of life. And Pope Benedict once said that the world offers you comfort, but you weren't made for comfort. You were made for greatness. St. John Paul II said that life with Christ is a wonderful adventure. Christ wants so much more for you than I think most of us want for ourselves. And some of you are there. We've got people in this room who have been counting down the days to be here again. People in this room who love the Lord, who love the scriptures, who love the Eucharist, who are on fire for him. And that's a beautiful thing. He's still calling you to more. He's got something new for you this weekend, something he wants to do in your life, something he wants to say into your heart. Will you listen? Some of you are here because two friends were going and you didn't want to sit at home bored without them all weekend. That's okay. I get that. I've been that kid. And I promise you that Christ has something for you, that he's calling out to you, that he wants that relationship with you. And that might seem like a lot to ask, right? But if we stop and think about the sports and the clubs and the social media and the dating relationships and the grades and all of it, what's it bringing us? What's it giving us? Is it creating life in you? Because Christ wants life for you. We were all made for greatness, and he is the only one who can satisfy. Whether we're ready to admit it or not, he's got that for us. I know that he can be hard to hear. And as we move forward tonight, we're going to have a chance to sit with him, to be with him, to listen to him. And as we move towards that, I just want to leave you with one final thought from St. Therese of Lisieux. Do you realize that Jesus is there in the tabernacle expressly for you alone? He burns with the desire to come into your heart. Go without fear to receive the Jesus of peace and love. He's waiting for you. He's longing for you. He wants nothing more than to spend that time with you. And he's got something to say. Will you listen?